The sun hung low over the Pacific, casting a golden hue on the waters surrounding the island of Iwo Jima. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and salt, punctuated by the distant sounds of artillery and the muffled cries of soldiers. In this pivotal moment of World War II, Japanese commanders stood on the island's rugged terrain, their faces etched with worry as they observed the overwhelming force of American troops advancing. How could an empire, once thought invincible, find itself cornered on the brink of collapse? The paradox of their situation was glaring. Despite their fierce determination and tactical planning, they faced an enemy whose resolve seemed unyielding. This episode isn't about the soldiers on the ground or the leaders making decisions. It's about the invisible forces of strategy, technology, and sheer will that decide wars. In the years leading up to the U.S. invasion of Iwo Jima, Japan's military strategy was rooted in a belief in its own superiority. The Japanese High Command was confident that their fortified islands would repel any American attack, viewing the Pacific theater as a space where they could exert their control. They adhered to the doctrine of Ketsu-go, which emphasized the defense of the homeland at all costs. This belief was reinforced by their earlier successes in the war, creating a sense of invulnerability that clouded their judgment. American forces, on the other hand, had been refining their tactics through hard-fought battles in the Pacific. The Battle of Guadalcanal had taught them valuable lessons about amphibious assaults and the importance of air support. However, even as they prepared for Iwo Jima, few anticipated the ferocity of the Japanese defense. The U.S. military expected a challenging but manageable fight, underestimating the entrenched positions and the morale of the Japanese troops. Both sides operated under a series of misconceptions. The Japanese believed that their defensive preparations would deter American forces, while the Americans thought that their technological advancements and superior numbers would guarantee victory. The clash of these beliefs set the stage for a brutal confrontation, one that would soon reveal the limits of their assumptions. As the invasion date approached, Japan's High Command conducted various war games, practicing their responses to potential American tactics. These simulations, however, failed to account for the adaptability of U.S. forces. The Japanese generals remained fixated on the notion that their pre-war strategies would hold against any adversary, leading to a profound blind spot regarding the innovative approaches the Americans would employ. In this context, the cultural underpinnings of both nations played a critical role. Japan's militaristic ethos glorified sacrifice and loyalty to the emperor, while the United States championed individualism and innovation. This cultural lens shaped the way both militaries approached warfare, leading to differing expectations about the nature of combat. It was a clash not just of armies, but of ideologies. The Japanese command also underestimated the logistical capabilities of the U.S. military. They believed that the vast distances of the Pacific would hinder American supply lines, yet U.S. forces had developed robust systems for sustaining operations over great distances. By the time the invasion of Iwo Jima commenced, the Americans had learned to leverage their resources effectively, which would give them a critical edge in the upcoming battle. As the date of the invasion drew closer, both sides were preparing for an encounter that would test their beliefs and strategies. The Japanese forces fortified their positions, digging deep into the volcanic soil of Iwo Jima to create a network of bunkers and tunnels. Meanwhile, the Americans gathered vast fleets of ships and aircraft, ready to unleash a coordinated assault. Each side believed in their own narrative, setting the stage for a confrontation that would soon challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare. In the days leading up to the invasion, intelligence reports suggested that Japanese forces were heavily entrenched on Iwo Jima. However, the extent of their fortifications and the determination of their soldiers remained underestimated by American planners. This gap in understanding would soon become evident as the battle unfolded, leading to a clash that would reshape the course of the war in the Pacific. As the battle for Iwo Jima commenced, the Japanese High Command encountered a decisive blind spot: their underestimation of American resolve and adaptability. Fixed in their beliefs, they clung to the idea that they could withstand the American onslaught simply through superior fortifications and a steadfast defense. This mindset was rooted in a cultural narrative that valued sacrifice and loyalty above all else, leading them to overlook the evolving nature of warfare. The Japanese did not fully grasp the extent of the American technological advancements. While they were aware of the U.S. Navy's strength, they failed to appreciate the effectiveness of American air support and naval bombardment. The scale and intensity of the pre-invasion bombardment shocked many Japanese defenders who had anticipated a more measured approach. This miscalculation led to a false sense of security, as they believed their positions were invulnerable to the kind of firepower the Americans were capable of unleashing. Moreover, the Japanese High Command underestimated the capabilities of U.S. Marines. The American forces had gained valuable experience in previous battles, learning to adapt quickly to changing conditions on the battlefield. This flexibility was a critical advantage that the Japanese struggled to counter. Their rigid adherence to traditional tactics left them ill-prepared for the innovative strategies employed by the Americans. Another factor contributing to Japan's blind spot was their reliance on outdated intelligence. They believed that their defensive strategies would be sufficient against an enemy they considered predictable. However, the Americans had refined their tactics, incorporating lessons learned from previous engagements. This disconnect between perception and reality would become painfully evident as the battle progressed. The Japanese defense was also hampered by their communication issues. Orders from high command often did not reach frontline troops in a timely manner, leading to confusion and disorganization. This lack of coordination would prove detrimental, as the Americans executed their assault with precision and efficiency, taking advantage of Japanese vulnerabilities. As the battle unfolded, the psychological impact on Japanese soldiers became apparent. Many had been led to believe that their sacrifices would lead to victory. However, the overwhelming force of the American assault shattered this belief, leading to disillusionment and despair among the ranks. This psychological shift was not something that the Japanese command had anticipated, further complicating their defense. In contrast, the American forces entered Iwo Jima with a clear understanding of their mission. They were prepared to face fierce resistance, but their collective training and experience instilled a sense of determination. The Japanese leadership had failed to recognize that the morale of their troops was deteriorating even as the battle raged on. Additionally, the Japanese forces were hindered by a lack of resources. The prolonged war had drained their supplies, making it difficult to sustain a protracted defense. This logistical shortfall was a critical oversight that would amplify the challenges they faced during the battle. Ultimately, the Japanese High Command's inability to adapt to the realities of modern warfare, combined with their overconfidence in their defensive strategies, created a perfect storm of vulnerability. This blind spot would prove catastrophic as the Americans pressed their advantage, leading to a brutal and bloody confrontation on Iwo Jima. The turning point in the battle for Iwo Jima was marked by a crucial technological advantage: the deployment of amphibious assault vehicles, artillery, and coordinated air support. These elements worked in concert to transform the battlefield and shift the dynamics of combat. The U.S. military had meticulously planned their approach, ensuring that each component was ready to respond to the challenges posed by the Japanese defenses. First, the amphibious assault vehicles allowed American forces to land directly on the beaches under heavy fire. These specialized vehicles provided crucial protection and mobility, enabling troops to advance quickly despite adverse conditions. The ability to transport soldiers and equipment directly into the fray drastically changed the nature of beach landings, which had historically been perilous. Second, the sheer volume of naval bombardment that preceded the invasion was unprecedented. American forces unleashed a relentless barrage of artillery and aerial strikes, softening up Japanese positions before ground troops made their landing. This overwhelming firepower not only caused significant damage to fortifications, but also instilled fear among the defenders, disrupting their ability to organize an effective counterattack. Lastly, the coordination between air and ground forces created a lethal combination that the Japanese were ill-equipped to handle. American aircraft provided close air support, targeting Japanese positions in real time as the battle unfolded. This integration of air power into ground operations allowed U.S. forces to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, ensuring a more dynamic approach to the fight. The Japanese, by contrast, were unable to match this level of coordination. Their reliance on static defenses limited their flexibility, and their communication breakdowns hampered their ability to respond to the evolving battlefield. As American forces advanced, they exploited these weaknesses, pushing deeper into Japanese territory with each passing hour. The technological advantage of the Americans was compounded by their logistical superiority. The U.S. military had established efficient supply lines, ensuring that troops received the necessary resources to maintain their momentum. This capability allowed them to sustain their operations over extended periods, a critical factor in the protracted battle for Iwo Jima. As the battle escalated, the Japanese forces found themselves increasingly isolated. The Americans' ability to transport troops and supplies swiftly meant that they could reinforce their positions quickly. This logistical edge translated into a significant operational advantage, as U.S. forces could exploit openings in Japanese defenses as they emerged. In essence, the technological advancements employed by the Americans transformed the battle for Iwo Jima into a struggle of attrition. The combination of amphibious vehicles, naval bombardment, and aerial support created a multi-layered approach to combat that overwhelmed Japanese defenses. This shift marked a turning point in the battle, revealing the limitations of traditional warfare tactics. As the conflict progressed, it became clear that those who lacked the technological edge could not compensate through sheer determination alone. The Japanese High Command had overestimated their capabilities while underestimating the innovations of their adversaries. This miscalculation ultimately sealed their fate, as the Americans pressed their advantage with relentless determination. The battle for Iwo Jima would serve as a stark reminder of the critical role that technology and logistics play in modern warfare. The lessons learned during this engagement would resonate far beyond the Pacific theater, shaping military strategies in the years to come. On February 19, 1945, the U.S. invasion of Iwo Jima began under a sky streaked with the orange hues of dawn. The air was thick with anticipation as thousands of Marines prepared to land on the island's black volcanic sands. The sound of crashing waves was soon drowned out by the roar of naval bombardment, a prelude to the chaos that would unfold. As the first waves of Marines hit the beach, they faced an onslaught of enemy fire. Yet they pressed forward, driven by a singular purpose: to capture the strategically vital island. Within minutes, the beach was a cacophony of noise. The thundering blasts of artillery mixed with the cries of men as they fought to establish a foothold. Marine forces quickly formed small units, moving under the cover of smoke and debris as they advanced toward the fortified Japanese positions. The initial assault had been met with fierce resistance, and the reality of the battle was harsher than many had anticipated. In a nearby bunker, Japanese soldiers were scrambling to respond to the unexpected ferocity of the American assault. They had expected a more protracted engagement, but the tide of American troops surged forward, bolstered by superior firepower. As the Marines breached the defenses, the psychological shock set in. The Japanese soldiers began to realize that their belief in an invulnerable defense was crumbling. As the day progressed, the fighting became increasingly brutal. The Americans pushed deeper into the island, encountering well-prepared positions that had withstood the initial bombardment. The smell of gunpowder and the sounds of battle filled the air, creating an atmosphere of desperation and determination on both sides. Meanwhile, the Japanese command struggled to adapt to the rapid changes on the battlefield. Their reliance on fixed positions became a liability, as the Americans maneuvered around them, exploiting weaknesses with tactical precision. Each passing hour brought a realization that their strategies were failing, and the battle was not unfolding as they had envisioned. By nightfall, the Americans had gained significant ground, but the cost was steep. Both sides incurred heavy casualties, a grim testament to the ferocity of the engagement. The island, once seen as a stronghold, was transforming into a graveyard of ambition and resolve, where the dreams of victory were slowly being drowned in the blood of the fighting men. The following days saw the battle escalate into a harrowing struggle for every inch of territory. The Japanese forces, though outnumbered, fought tenaciously, determined to hold their ground. This fierce resistance was fueled by a sense of duty and honor, yet the realization that their defensive strategies were failing loomed heavily over the island like a dark cloud. As the Americans continued to press the attack, the psychological toll on Japanese soldiers became apparent. Many began to question the possibility of victory, grappling with the fear that their sacrifices might ultimately lead to defeat. The shifting tide of battle shattered their earlier confidence, leaving them to confront the harsh reality of their situation. On March 26, 1945, after weeks of intense fighting, the battle for Iwo Jima concluded. The cost was staggering, with thousands of lives lost on both sides. The island had changed hands, but the echoes of conflict lingered, serving as a stark reminder of the ferocity of the struggle and the limits of human endurance. The arithmetic of victory at Iwo Jima was stark and unforgiving. The U.S. forces faced an uphill battle, but their ability to mobilize resources and manpower played a crucial role in their success. During the course of the battle, American forces deployed over 600 ships and sent nearly 110,000 troops to the island. This massive logistical operation was unprecedented and illustrated the scale of the U.S. military's commitment. The bombardment preceding the invasion saw over 3,000 tons of bombs dropped on Iwo Jima in the days leading up to the landing. This relentless assault aimed to destroy Japanese fortifications, but records indicate that approximately 10% of the ordnance failed to detonate, leaving some positions intact. This statistic underscored the challenges faced by American forces in achieving total air superiority, yet the sheer volume of firepower still had a significant psychological impact on Japanese defenders. As the battle unfolded, American forces suffered approximately 26,000 casualties, including more than 6,800 killed. In contrast, Japanese forces experienced staggering losses, with estimates suggesting that around 21,000 soldiers were killed during the fighting. The disproportionate casualty rate highlighted the dire consequences of miscalculations on both sides, particularly in Japan's assessment of American capabilities. The strategic importance of Iwo Jima became evident as the battle progressed. The island served as a critical base for U.S. operations, allowing for the staging of air raids against the Japanese mainland. The capture of Iwo Jima meant that American bombers would have a closer launching point, reducing flight times and increasing the number of missions that could be launched. This operational efficiency translated into enhanced firepower against Japanese targets. The loss of Iwo Jima also had a profound psychological impact on the Japanese military. The island had been viewed as a symbol of their strength, and its fall marked a significant blow to morale. The Japanese High Command had invested heavily in the island's defenses, and the realization that their efforts had been in vain forced a re-evaluation of their strategies moving forward. U.S. forces had anticipated that the battle would last only a few days. However, the actual duration of the fighting extended over 36 days, reflecting the fierce resistance encountered. This shift in expectation led to further logistical challenges, as supply lines were stretched and reinforcements were needed to maintain momentum. The mathematical realities of the battle highlighted the importance of adaptability in warfare. American commanders adjusted their tactics based on real-time intelligence and battlefield conditions, allowing them to exploit weaknesses in Japanese defenses. This ability to pivot in response to changing circumstances was a critical factor in their eventual success. The statistics surrounding the battle were not merely numbers. They represented sacrifices made by individuals on both sides. The loss of life and the toll on both nations underscored the brutal nature of the conflict and raised difficult questions about the costs of victory. Ultimately, the arithmetic of victory at Iwo Jima revealed that success in warfare is not solely determined by numbers, but by the effective application of resources, strategy, and adaptability. The lessons learned from this battle would resonate throughout the remainder of the war and into future military engagements. The battle for Iwo Jima marked a turning point not only in the Pacific theater, but also in the broader context of World War II. The fall of the island brought an end to the myth of Japanese invincibility, shattering the perception that their defensive strategies could withstand any assault. The fierce fighting and the high casualty rates forced a re-evaluation of military doctrine on both sides, leading to significant changes in how future battles would be fought. For the United States, the victory at Iwo Jima solidified the importance of air power and logistics in modern warfare. The successful capture of the island allowed U.S. forces to establish a strategic base for air operations, facilitating the bombing of the Japanese mainland. This shift marked a transition in the war, as the focus increasingly turned toward the systematic dismantling of Japanese capabilities through sustained aerial bombardment. The loss of Iwo Jima also prompted significant changes within the Japanese military. The High Command began to recognize the limitations of their defensive strategies and the need for adaptation in the face of overwhelming American firepower. This realization would inform their approach to future conflicts as they sought to develop more flexible tactics to counter U.S. advances. Furthermore, the battle highlighted the psychological toll of warfare on both sides. The brutality of the fighting left deep scars on the collective consciousness of both nations. In Japan, the loss of Iwo Jima became emblematic of a broader struggle for survival, raising questions about the viability of their imperial ambitions. In the United States, the heavy casualties forced a reckoning with the human cost of victory, shaping public perceptions of the war. The legacy of Iwo Jima extended beyond the immediate outcome of the battle. The iconic image of the flag raising atop Mount Suribachi became a symbol of American resilience and determination. It represented not only a military victory, but also a unifying moment for a nation grappling with the realities of war. In the years following the battle, the lessons learned at Iwo Jima would influence military strategy in subsequent conflicts. The emphasis on combined arms operations, logistics, and adaptability became central tenets of U.S. military doctrine. These principles would shape the preparation and execution of future engagements, reflecting the enduring impact of the battle. Additionally, the memories of Iwo Jima would serve as a reminder of the sacrifices made by both American and Japanese soldiers. The high casualty rates and the brutal nature of the fighting underscored the tragedy of war, prompting discussions about the moral implications of military strategy. This reflection on the human cost of conflict became a crucial aspect of post-war discourse. As the war drew to a close, Iwo Jima stood as a testament to the complexities of warfare. The battle was not merely a clash of arms, but a reflection of the broader forces that shape human conflict. The lessons learned on that island would resonate for generations, influencing military thought and shaping the course of future engagements. The battle for Iwo Jima transformed the understanding of warfare in the Pacific and beyond. The question of whether the Japanese could withstand a determined American assault was answered with profound clarity. It wasn't the best fortifications or the most fervent ideology that won. It was the best system of tactics, technology, and logistics that ultimately prevailed. As nations reflect on the lessons of Iwo Jima, one must ask, how will the dynamics of warfare continue to evolve in the face of new challenges?